Morning, gentlemen. Today is Daf Chof, Seches Bava Kama. So we left off. We got
Right? Okay.
no second pair. It's a regular second pair. First word, top line.
Okay, wait a minute.
Or top line, first word. And Chof in Bava Kama. So we were discussing, right, some of the intricacies of Nezek, right? When there's Shane, Shane is normally something which is eaten in a normal manner, and then there's also the aspect of doing something which is abnormal, right? Which would be a tolada of Karen, where you only pay Chatzi Nezek, and then it's a question of as to where it occurred. So let's continue with this discussion. First, we're top line. Hahi. Thank you very much.
Also, what time are we tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah. What time? Meeting tomorrow is 7:45. I didn't look at tomorrow's date.
What is tomorrow?
Quick look. Aleph looks okay. Let's call it, we'll call it a 7:10 soft start. So 7:10, but we're going to be ready. The Zoom got will be rolling by 7:15. So
when do they? Can I?
All right,
when do they start davening?
Alan will do it. What? 7:45 tomorrow morning. So 7:10 here. I'll pick you up around 7ish.
Oh, okay.
You can sleep in. You can wake up at 1:30 a.m.
I never
too.
do any.
I know.
It's bad.
I know. Jack usually wakes up around what time? 2:30, 3 o'clock.
Right.
All right.
What time is second fish?
Yeah.
Let's go.
All right. So Baruch the Chazal Lifta Apuma the Dana.
Away.
So here was a goat, an AIDS, right? The Dash goes right. That there was a turnip on a barrel, and it climbed up on it. Salik achla lelifta b'taver ledan. So it climbed up on top of this barrel, ate the turnip, and so obviously it ate the turnip, so it destroyed the turnip, and it also broke the barrel from the way to turnip. So chayvi rabba alifta the adan nezik shalom. So he was mechayiv it both nezik shalom, both for eating it and for breaking the barrel. So my time, I came into Orchei Lemichel Lifta. Since it's the normal way of a goat to go ahead and eat a turnip, so therefore it also is considered to be normal, right? A normal behavior to go ahead and climb on top of the barrel. So Amar Ilfa Behema B'Shus Rabim. So let's say the animals are Shus Rabim. Pashtet Svara LeAchla Me'al Gabe Chaverta. Let's say the animals are Shus Rabim, then extended the snack and it ate from on top of another animal. There's just a rabbi, so chayav, he's chayav my timer. So gabi chaver to chatzar nizak dam. The private, the animal, even though it's a rabbi, but on top of the animals, like a rishus of the nizak, and therefore one would be chayav. So levim b'sai. Let's say that we have a proof. Haisa kupaso move sheles lacharav. Upash tzar of the achla. So let's say a person was, I guess there was like a box or something like on someone's back, and the animal extended its neck and ate from it. Chayaves. So that animal is chayiv. So what do you see on top of a person or a human or something like that is considered to be the rishus of the nizak, and therefore it's like an animal that goes into and eats in someone's rishus, right? Animal goes into my yard, the rishus of the nizak, right? You're chayiv. So over here, on top of the person or on top of the animal, you also be chayiv. So Gemara says no, maybe it's different. Kedama Rava, maybe what it means chayiv, like Rava bekofetzes, right? It's referring to a case of basically where it jumps on top, which is abnormal. And now maybe it's considered not Rishus Nizak, maybe it's considered Rishus Rabbin. And what's the case? So it's a case of like Karen, where it's abnormal behavior, like jumping, and therefore you're chayiv chatzi nezek. It doesn't mean chayiv nezek shalim. Maybe it means chatzi nezek. And where did Rava say this? So where Rava said, in this case, so the animals of Rishus Rabbin, halcha v'achla. Tura, amdav yachla chayavis. So the animal was walking and ate his pater, but if it stood up and ate it, it's chayav. So ma'ishna halcha. So why is it when it's walking the archehu? So amadanami archehu. So standing is also normal for the animal to just go ahead and stand up on its hind legs. It's also should be considered to be normal. It should be chayav the same way. Samarava b'kafetzas. Right? It's referring to when it jumps up, it's abnormal behavior. So since it's abnormal behavior, so therefore one is not considered to be arche. And Boy Rab Zera, Mizgalgal. Let's say Mizgalgal normally means rolling, but over here, Mahu. So it means if something basically this is the machlokes as to how to understand this case. If something started in the rishus of Mark wasn't here today. Mark Summer.
No, he's not gonna be here till Wednesday.
He's Thanksgiving. I'm saying he's whatever. He's not out of town.
He's turkey partying.
I see. All right. He's doing his East Coast tour. So he said, but I'm saying it's misgalgal mal. Hey chidami. So what's the case of misgalgal? To go the kaima amer b'rshus hayachid. The kaima misgalgal b'asim b'rshus hayachid b'rshus harabim. Right. So this straw I guess started off in the rshus hayachid, and then it rolled, right? Quote unquote rolled. So the machlokes as to how to understand it rolled. Did it actually move, or was it extended? We'll soon see. But it basically went from the rshus hayachid into the rshus harabim. So what is the halacha there? So Tashma, come and listen. The Tani Reb Chia, Mashrei Miktsasa B'Fnim, right? Mashrei Miktsasa B'Fnim. Let's say you had some sort of, I guess like a package or something like that was partially inside of Miktsasa B'Chutz. Achla B'Fnim. If it ate it from the inside, then it's chayeves. Achla B'Chutz P'tura. If it was on the inside, then it's Rishus the Nizak, then you're chayev. If it was on the outside, i.e. in the Rishus Harabim, then you be P'tura. So my lab is galgal. Isn't I referring to a case? So basically, we're started off there and it rolled there. So you see, then you be chayav there. So the says low ema achla al mashi b'fnim chayeves al mashi b'chutz p'tura. No, it doesn't mean that it started off in the rishus hayachid and ended in rishus harabim. Rather, it was in both, and therefore you ate from the part that was in the rishus hayachid you be chayav, and the part that was in the rishus harabim you be patur or iboy sema. You come Reb Chia b'psila de. As pasta, right? We're talking about like the long reeds or some sort of a long, I'm sorry, long stalk that extended from one to the other, and therefore it depends what the animal is. If the animal was eating from the area of the stalks in the Rishus Yachid, he'd be chayav because it's Rishus Nizak. But if it was eating from the part that extended out in the Rishus Harabim, then it would be patur. Fine. So back to what we said in the Mishnah. So we had the Mishnah on yesterday in Yud Testament Beis. So the Mishnah over there said, we're talking about shane, and if the animal ate, let's say clothing, then mishalim chatzi nezek, then you pay half nezek. And we said b'medvar murim b'rshus hanizak. Only if it's b'rshus nizak b'rshus harabim, then you be patur. So what does it mean? The rshus harabim you be patur. So which case are we going on? So Amarav Akulu means the entire case, and that was the entire case that whether it was something which would be considered to be muad, then you pay nezek shalem, and the clothing would be chatzi nezek. But this is only we're talking about. But in the Rishus Harabim, you can be completely patur. So my time, because it's my time. Kol mashana uba acher v'shina ba patur. Because we have a rule. Even though that normally if my animal goes ahead and does something abnormal, I'm chayiv chatzi nezek, right, which is the rule of Karen that we know from the Torah. But let's say the nizak did something also abnormal. So therefore, since he did something that was not so normal, like leave his clothes out in the middle of Rishus Harabim, right? No one does that. So therefore, we're both at fault, and therefore I'm patur.
Why would the animal fall off? Some leaves are stuck in the Rosh Hashanah, and some anyone can pick it up, and anyone can eat it. It doesn't.
All right, so we'll see. That's a very good point. And the Gemara is actually going to be one of the terusim.
The animal got hurt on that.
Amen. So he does patur. Shmuel Amar lo yishan el peiros v'yirakos. No, he says no. We're only talking about the peiros v'yirakos about ksus v'kelim chayeves. But the ksus and kelim. Then you've still, so in other words, only by the peiros. If the peiros are in the Rishus Nizak, then you're chayiv nezek shalim. If it's in the Rishus Harabim, then you're completely patur. But the ksus and kalim, if you leave it out, if they were left out in the Rishus Harabim, then the animal ate it, he would still be chayiv chatzi nezek. What's going on? The first part he said I guess Rav, right? That was the first part was Rav. The also the Reish Lakish l'tamayel and Reish Lakish l'shitaz the damer Reish Lakish. Shtei parais b'shus harabim. There are two cows, b'shus harabim. Achas revutza. One of them was crouching down, abnormal behavior. The achas nahaleches. The other one was walking. Biata malachas b'revutza. So the one that was walking kicked, which is abnormal. An animal that was crouching, it was also abnormal. So two abnormals over there. P'tura. So since each of them were at partial fault, we say you're patur. And however, the revutza mahalachas, but however, let's say the one that was crouching down, which is abnormal, then it further acted abnormally by kicking the one that was just walking, which is completely normal, then it's chayeves. Then you're chayev. But we see over here that the abnormal results in patura and not chatzi nesek. Rabbi Yechon Amar, and the Rabbi Yechon said of it, lo shanu elo peros yirakos. That which we said, we're only talking about if the peros and yirakos were left in shus rabim, then you're pater. But let's say the clothing utensils left and they were damaged, eaten. So then we'd say that the owner of the animal is chayav chatzi nesek. So Rabbi Yechon less like the Reish Lakish. Let's say he does not hold like the case of Reish Lakish. He says no. Afilu b'shtei paros. Even in that case, he doesn't hold like the shtei paros. Goes says lo. He's like no. Even in the case of the cows we just said, he can agree with it. So why is this case different? So ksus of the inchi demanchi galima machadbi. Now that people do indeed go ahead and leave their stuff out. People do go ahead and put down their coat or something in their shus harabim. Therefore, it is considered to be normal behavior, right? And therefore, right. So Alan was asking, it's not normal. So according to this, that it is normal. A person goes ahead and lies out, assumes no one's going to go ahead and take it. Maybe there's simanim on there, right? So therefore, that is normal. About behema, but the case of the animal, that was both of them was abnormal for it to go ahead and crush. Behema lav arche. And if we say if the animal goes ahead and gets hana, right? So back in the Mishnah, just
from whatever they're eating.
From whatever they're eating. So let's say in the Mishnah, so we go back in the Mishnah, we're talking about eating, and we say if the animal, the lemaisa, now I don't have to feed my animal anymore, even though he ate something he doesn't normally eat, right? So he's mishalemes mashanis, so he has to go ahead and pay what he benefited from. It's vikama. So how much do you go ahead and pay? So Rab Omar Dmeyamir. So he says, all right. So he says the value of that which he ate in straw. So let's say he ate. I just found the case, right? It doesn't say. Okay, right. So let's say he ate something. So you pay basically what he would pay for the same amount in straw, right? He doesn't pay for the barley, right? He pays for the straw, which is cheaper. And Rav Omar Dmei Sa'arim Bazul says, oh, okay, what he ate barley. So fine, but even if he would feed his animal barley, right? He had a good hearty meal, barley, but he would only buy barley for his animal if it was like, if it was on sale, right? If it was on sale, if it was a third off, as we'll soon see. And Tani Kavasi the Rabba, we have a Bryson for Rabba and Bryson for Rabba. Tani Kavasi the Rabba, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. A Mishalamas El Demei Omer. Bilvad, you only go ahead and pay that the quantity of what he ate, but you pay it in animal feed. And Tani Kvasi the Rava, in the Henes Mishalemes, right? If he did go ahead and get benefit, then he pays Ma Mehenes, right? So he pays for Mishalemes Ma Mehenes. So how does he do it? So Ketzad, Achla Kav Kabayim, so he ate like a kav or two. Ain't Aimim Tashin, you don't say pay their value. Elo Aimdim Kama Adam Reitzil Hachel the Hemtai Devarila. How much would a person want to go ahead and feed his animal, which is fit for it? And Af Bishena Ragil, right? Even though it's not normal for it to eat. So I would never normally go ahead and treat my animal to a barley meal. But if there was barley there, only I would go ahead and pay like the wholesale or the cheap price of the barley. Lafichach, therefore, achla chitin or davara, therefore wheat I guess was not good for the animal, or davara, something which is bad for it, then ptura, then is pater. Why? Because we don't say how much would a person want to go ahead and pay for this, because he wouldn't pay for it. He wouldn't pay for chocolate for his dog, right? It's not good for his dog, right? So therefore, such a case, he wouldn't be chayiv at all. And Amarle Rav Chisda Rav Rechama. So now comes a fun question. Now this is basically going to take us to the next sugya of the day. We're around 6 lines from the bottom. So Amarle Rav Chisda Rav Rechama. Lo Haviz Gaban Abi Arsa. The Tchuma, right? So he says, you missed it, right? I hope you missed out last night. You should have been with us last night, right? You should have promised the boy because there was a great tasha. We were talking a great case. So okay, what was this discussion? Okay, you piqued my interest. Said Rav Ruchama, what did you guys discuss, Rav Chisda? So hadar b'chatzer chavero shaloi bidaita. Tzarich lolois l'scharo ein tzarich. Let's say I go ahead and I live in your yard. I go to Alan's yard, Alan Sorsher. Right, you're my guy today. Right, so I go ahead and I go to Alan's yard without telling him, and I sleep there. Right, I set up my tent and I sleep there. Do I have to go ahead and pay Alan or not? So the Gemara says, "Hey, chidami, what's the case? If it's normal, if you were talking about a case where Alan never rents out his yard to people, and I never, rent yards, so zelo never zelo chaser, right? I didn't really benefit because I didn't save money by living there free because I never rent yards to sleep in, and Alan didn't lose out because Alan never rents out his yard. So why would I pay him anything? So Ella, maybe we're talking about a case of Bechaser the Kaim Lager. Alan usually rents out his yard, the Gavadavi Miga, and I usually have to go ahead and rent the yard to sleep in. So this is a case of Zena. This is a case of where I'm benefiting by not paying, and Alan is at a loss because he normally rents out his yard. So obviously, you would have to pay him. He says, no, let's Bechaser the like Kaim Lager. Really, Alan never rents out his yard. However, but I always go ahead and I sleep, and I usually go ahead.
Yeah.
And I usually go ahead and pay, to sleep out in people's yards. So now in this case, so Matzi can I say to Alan, hey, you didn't lose out. What'd you lose, Alan? You lost nothing because you never rent out your yard. So I didn't cause you any loss. I didn't ruin anything. I'm leaving, right? Oh, Dilma, maybe you can say Matzi Amarlei, right? Matzi from the page. Dilma Matzi Amar ha Isnanas. Alan could say, Lamaisa Yoel, you always pay $20 to go ahead and sleep in a yard, and so you benefited from me, so you show me money, right? So this is called a case of Zenana Zelo Chaser. This is the Sugar timeout. So I benefited by having a free night in Alan's yard, but Alan was not at a loss. He wasn't Chaser because he normally doesn't rent it out to anybody. So do I have to pay him or not? So that was the big question. Ryan Rachama, you missed all the fun last night. So Ryan Rachama turned to me and says, Amalei, Masnizani. So Ryan Rachama says, it's a Mishnah. I understand what's the big discussion. So Rav Chizda looked at him puzzled. He says, hi, Masni. So says, which Mishnah? What are you talking about? So Amalei. So he said to him, I can only go ahead and, you want me to teach you, like be a Rebbe, you got to serve me a little bit. So Shakal Sudra, Karachle, he says, okay, fine, give me your coat. I'll fold it up. I'll make it nice. So he did it for Rav Merchama. Samarlei, Inenes Meshalemes Mashenes. Look at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, if the animal, right, the owner of the animal benefited, then he has to pay for what he benefited. Right? Sounds like in this case, I would have to pay Alan because I benefited. So Rava says, right? Looking at people, he doesn't get sick or doesn't, no damage, nothing bad happens to, someone who Hashem, I guess who serves his master. In other words, that Hashem looks out for people, looks out for Ram Rechama to go ahead and teach things. Because even though really the two Mishnayos are not really similar, he sort of accepted the answer. What do you mean? Because in the case of our Mishnah, so the animal ate the guy's barley, right? So my animal ate Eddie's barley, right? So it's not a case of Zenana where I benefited and Eddie was not at a loss. Eddie was at a loss. Zenana, he's eating his barley. It's not comparable, right? And Bahai, in the case of Alan, there was no loss to Alan. It was just on his yard. I didn't use up anything. All right, so that's a pretty good question. So what did Rav Chama say? It's it's a pretty obvious question. He is chaser. So he says no. Stam peros. This is a little bit of Alan what you were saying. Stam peros b'shus harabim afkurim afkirlu. A person goes ahead and leaves out his barley or his fruits in the shus harabim, right? So it's like he's making them hefker. So therefore, when my animal eats the barley, Eddie is not, there weren't really Eddies because you leave him out. It's like you made him hefker. Fine. New case, but. Right. So it could be that maybe fruit. This is said, but that's why pears. Maybe pears is different. Maybe something with a simon is a little different. If I leave my coat out, that was what we had before. We said people do leave their coats out. So you leave your coat out. So it's like siman, maybe it's different versus something which is, fruit, that the only thing that, could identify would be the location, but things get kicked around and it's just around. So you can't necessarily teach it or you learn from there. Now, new case, same concept. So Tanan, Hamakiv Chavera Mishlesh Rechaisa. So let's say we're talking about a case of where
Rashi has a picture.
Rashi has a picture, sort of, right? So let's say Avrami has a yard, and surrounded by Avrami's yard, Randy has 4 different fields: north, south, east, and west. So he puts a fence. Let's say the picture usually the top is actually east, but let's say he puts a fence, by the north yard, on the east yard, and the west yard, but not the south yard. Okay, so basically, it sort of looks like that picture in Rashi, where it's open on one end. So now the guy Avrami who's on the inside, he can't go ahead and let his dog out, right? Because there's still an open fence, right? So his yard is not completely guarded, right? He's only surrounded by 3 sides. It's not completely, protected. So Randy goes ahead. He builds a fence around 3 of the sides because he has all the outer fields. And he puts the fence up as the Rishonim, as the Shneim, as the Shlishi. So he puts up a fence around 1, 2, and 3. Randy can't go ahead and turn to Avrami and say, okay, now pay me for the cost of the fence, because it's still open. But if he did the 4th one, if he did the 4th side, right? Then he could say, okay, Avrami, since I now basically fenced off your entire field and you now benefited, now you got to go ahead and pay me. So Shmamina, Zenana, Vizelo Chaser Taif.
But hold on, who really benefits from that? Because Randy may be benefiting because now nobody can come into his land.
Right. So So Randy is for sure benefiting. The question is Avrami benefiting?
That's the question. Why is Avrami benefiting? What benefit does he have? He's only stuck in his.
I mean, I guess there's ways to get out. He's not like limited in, but now his field is protected, right? His field is protected, right? So you say over here, right? This is the case of Zen Avizela Chaser, right? So over here, since in this case that Avrami is now he's completely fenced in, but it didn't cost Randy anything to go ahead and fence Avrami in because he was doing it all for himself. And nevertheless, we see that Avrami is chayiv to go ahead and pay him. So the Gemara says, no, Shani Hasan Darmalei, Azgamartali Hekefa Yisera. So no, maybe it's different. Maybe he's saying because Randy could say, Avrami, because your field was there, you caused me to go ahead and put up the the other fence. So Tashma, come on, listen, Amar Rabbi Yaisi, Im Aman Nikaf. Let's say Randy put up 3 fences, and Im Aman Nikaf, and then Avrami came and he says he built the 4th fence for God as Rabbi's.
Right.
Magalgalav Esakol. Then since we see Avrami put up the 4th fence, we see that he also now benefited from fences 1, 2, and 3, right? And therefore he has to go ahead and contribute to all of them. So Talmud the God Nikaf. The only reason is because Avrami went and built it. Makif. But let's say Randy just built the 4th fence, and he's pater. So Shmamina Zenev Zelochaser pater. Then in this case, Avrami would be pater because he didn't, he didn't tell him to build it. He just built it, right? Okay, by benefit, but you didn't lose anything. So he says no. So Avrami said, no, you went ahead and built a nice fence, a nice chuling fence. I just would have planted some bushes. So now, just for privacy, but you put this extra fence. I'm not paying you for that. So therefore, he's parted from paying extra costs. Maybe you have to contribute just the minimal amount.
That'd be very practical. Your neighbor nowadays, you have 2 neighbors, and somebody built a fence, a nice fence.
Right.
It's helping both, so the other neighbor has to help pay for the fence.
Right. So this would be the case. I mean, right. So it's a lot. Well, they both have lands. They have lands next to each other. But in that case, it would be something that I'm doing it for you. The other person say, well, I didn't want it there. But even if you didn't want it or whatever but you're benefiting from it, then you might not be able to have that claim. In the case of Zenana and Zelochas.
Whose land was this?
They each have the land. They're next to each other. Yeah, they both have land.
Own it?
No, they're next door neighbors.
But
And they built a fence.
The guy that built it, was it on his land?
It was on both lands. It was in the middle. Right.
Separating.
So Tashma, come and listen.
No, so the other guy would be who doesn't want to pay.
Right.
I think he would be right because.
Well, he doesn't, but he's benefiting. So the question is, if I'm benefiting, but you're not a loss, do I have to pay for that which I benefited?
I would say no because he didn't.
But ultimately, if you would have put up some sort of fence anyway, but now you built it already, so I can say at least contribute the minimum amount that you would have paid for a fence. So,
So what did they
touch
say?
back.
So what do they say here? I would see,
So we couldn't bring a proof, but we said that machlokas over there whether we tried to bring out a proof, but we were unsuccessful.
Oh.
So Tashma, come and listen. Towards the middle of the page, Habayis Belia. Now, different case of neighbors, upstairs and downstairs. They live in a 2 flats. One guy owns the downstairs, the other guy lives in the upstairs. Habayis Belia shel shnayim shenaflu, and it fell down. So they got to rebuild it. So I'm about Aliyah. So the guy, the upstairs guy says, "Okay, build your downstairs so I can build my upstairs." So I'm about Aliyah. Labalabai is leave nice. But when it writes the downstairs neighbor says, "I'll take my time. I'll do what I want."
I'll take insurance money.
Right. So the guy upstairs says, "I don't have time for waiting for your reports and all that." Who ain't right? Hare Baaliyah Baina Bai. So he goes ahead and he builds the first floor, then he builds the second floor. But Yeshi, but he's living. He can live in the bottom floor. Right? So he can go ahead and live downstairs until the downstairs guys pays him for the construction for building the downstairs. So Yitziyasav de Mechayev Le'Alabai. So now he's only chayav to go ahead and pay that. We built it. But let's say the guy lived downstairs for a year before he was reimbursed, and then he moved upstairs, right? So maybe you could say, well, you lived in downstairs, which was my, I had the rights of downstairs, and therefore you should pay me rent for living in my place. So Shmamina Zenem Zelochasir Pater, because this one was benefiting and he wasn't chasir. In other words, the guy downstairs wasn't chasir at all, and the other guy was benefiting. So maybe you could say, go ahead and pay him. But he's pater. The rest says no. Shani Hassan, the Beisil Aliyah Mishtabi. So he says, no, the reason why I made his pater is because the downstairs neighbor has an obligation to his upstairs neighbor. He has to have a house there in order for the guy upstairs. But since he didn't do it, so therefore maybe that's why he's pater. So Tashma, Rabbi Yehuda Imer, Abzeh, Hadar b'chatzir chavero, Shalom Idaito, Tzarich Lalos Yischar. Even right, this in a case of where someone is living in someone else's chatzir without his knowledge, so he has to go ahead and give him a schar, give him the papers. In other words, he doesn't go ahead and have to go ahead and pay the guy who owns the rights of the first floor. He doesn't have to pay him rent for living there because Lamaisi was there. So Shmamina Zenev Zeloch Chaser Chayiv. So we see that one is Nana, right? The downstairs guy, the upstairs guys was Nana. From the downstairs guys who's not Chaser because he didn't pay for anything, he's still Chayiv. Whereas says no. Shani Hasam Meshub Shcharisa Deashaitza. No, it's different because over here, by living downstairs, basically you cause damage. You blacken the house a little bit, right? You're running the oven, you're running the heat, you're doing all that. So since he is using it, Lamaisa, it's not considered to be a case of Zelo Chaser. He is chaser a little bit. So Shalchi Bei Rabbi Ami. So they sent to the house of Rabbi Ami, to the yeshiva of Rabbi Ami. Amar b'chimasa lo b'ma chaser. Right. So he said. So in other words, what did the guy do by living there? And what type of loss did he incur? He didn't incur loss by living there, right? So he didn't lose anything. And Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Nisyashe b'davar. So he says, okay, I'll have to go ahead and see. I'll get back to you. So Hadar Shechu Kamei Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So he sent again to Rabbi Chia bar Abba multiple times. Amar multiple times. No, you have an answer to this case over there. He didn't really lose anything. Does he have to pay him or not? So Amar Kuli Hai Shachal Abazi. Right? He says, why they ask him so many times? Had I not found a source for it, they don't think I would have responded. So stop asking me. Once I get the teretz, I'll let you know. So Itamar, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Ein Tzarich La'alos Yischar. He doesn't have to go ahead and pay him the rent. And Rabbi Avo, Amar Tzarich La'alos Yischar. He does have to go ahead and pay him the rent for the downstairs until the guy, for using it. And Amar Papa had Rabbi Avo la b'ferishit. Right, that was Rabbi Avo says they have to go ahead and pay him for the rent for the time he spent downstairs. He didn't say b'ferish ela michlalitima. Rather, we can infer for something that was stated. That's now we're going to the Mishnah. Natal even okara shel hektish. So let's say the Gizbar went ahead and he took, let's say, a beam or stone or something from hektish. So it was owned by hektish, and he took it. Now the Gizbar is allowed to. He's able to go ahead and move around things that are owned by hektish. Because he's the Gizbar, he's the treasurer, right? It's different from someone unlike you or me. If I take something from Hektish, I'm trying to acquire it, and therefore perhaps I could be violating the Elo. But the Gizbar, he works with the stuff. So not Hektish, so the Gizbar has not violated Mila. However, Nasan Chaver, but if he gave it to his friend, so by his friend getting it, now it's already in someone else's rishus because the gizbar is like an extension of hektish, but this chaver is not. Humal b'chaver lo'imo. This gizbar, he is violated Mila, but the friend didn't do anything because he didn't take it. It was the other guy who did it. So banal l'sech beso. Let's say the gizbar went ahead and put it in, built into his house. Arei ze lo mal ad sheyidor tachteh shava pruta. So the gizbar still has not violated it until he lives underneath it. He used it as his roof.
Now I guess I'm not.
For Shel Pruta, right? Shmuel says an ad. He didn't build it into his house. He just placed it over the skylight. So in other words, if he built it in his house, then the gizbar would be acquiring it at that moment, and then he would be chayiv. But over here, we're talking about where the gizbar just, let's say, laid it on top as a roof, and then just lived under it and got Shavat Pruta valued. Now he violated me. The Yosef, now what did Rabbi Abu say? The Yosef Rabbi Abu came to Rabbi Yechon, Tamar Mishmei Shmuel, and he said, what do you see in there? Hadar b'chatzer chavera shalemi daito tzarich lalos eschar. Right, so we see that if one goes ahead and uses someone else's chatzer without his knowledge, he has to go ahead and pay him for it. So too over here, right? In other words, in this case, I'm not using up this beam of hektish, right? There's no chaser to cause to hektish, and I'm living underneath it. And so once I get hana, I'm chayiv to pay. So what do you see over there? That once that zenana, the ze lo chaser, sarich l'shalin, right? The shatzikle, right? And he was quiet. So he said, there must be that since he was quiet, he must have agreed with you. However, maybe it's not here. Maybe he says he didn't even think it was a good proof. Why? So the rabbi hektash shalamidas kehedya midas dam. That a case of hedya, we don't say the hedya, right? Actually, when it comes to hektash, right? No harm, no foul, right? In other words, over there, because hektish always knows about it. In the case of me living in Alan's yard, right? So Alan didn't know about it, right? So therefore, he didn't know about it. I lived there, and all of a sudden afterwards, like do it. If I come before, obviously, I would have to go ahead and pay because Alan will say, "Okay, you're sitting in my yard. You got to go ahead and pay me." So to over here, you don't say that he took the beam and hektish didn't know about it, and therefore I can go, and therefore I'm not chayiv to pay, or I would be chayiv to pay. Of course, you're chayiv to pay because hektish always knows. It's like a hedya, midas dummy. And therefore, because I had this with das, I would have to pay. So in the case of hektish, even if the hektish doesn't know, it's considered like hektish knows I'm using the beam, and therefore I would have to go ahead and pay hektish for the usage. Or in this case, I would be chayiv for me. I'm sorry.
I'll get back to you.
Oh, right. In that case, right. So he didn't have an answer. In other words, he never came up with a teretz. Right. He says, if I knew something, I would send it to you, and he never did. We had another case, which is Machlokas of Rabbi Abo and who was the other one? And Rav Kahana, Rabbi Yechon, yeah, where they did argue, but we're trying to infer what they said. All right, we'll continue with this discussion tomorrow, Mr. Shem. So tomorrow, 7:10.